His answer was essentially, if I do that, now I've got the starting quarterback looking over his shoulder. Well, you know what? We all look over our shoulder. In every part of business, we're all looking over our shoulder, not just sports. You have to perform to stay in your position. And I don't care whether Justin Fields has to look over his shoulder. After performances like yesterday, he should have been looking over his shoulder.
Hello and welcome to Gangs All Here. My name is Ryan Sampson. That's our guy Mark Cannizzaro from the New York Post, our sports columnist. The Jets are coming off a 13-11, absolutely brutal, ugly loss in London versus the Denver Broncos. And we're here to talk about it with Mark and break down Aaron Glenn's postgame comments, Aaron Glenn's comments today, talk about the situation, Justin Fields' play. We're going to break it all down on today's episode of Gangs All Here. But before I get to any of that, Mr. Cannizzaro, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm trying to recover from what I was watching from across the pond yesterday, Ryan. It's weird. I wasn't covering the game. We just had our beat writer, Brian Costello, over there. And it's just an odd sensation when you're watching it on television, rather than being at the game. Almost, not that I am a Jet fan, I'm neutral, but it was maddening to watch, and it kind of put me in the shoes of the Jet fan. Not that I don't feel like I always am, because I'm a fan myself in general in sports, but I watched it and I just was like, what are we doing here? Not dissimilar from what I would be thinking in the press box, but I'm more charting it in the press box than I am just watching it on TV here. And again, I just felt like I was in this, sitting in the lounge chair of a Jet fan, pulling hair by hair out when you're wondering what they're doing offensively. Why aren't they, running more design runs with Justin Fields,
Oof.
who obviously can't pass the ball? Why aren't they throwing the ball to Brees Hall, who was supposed to be in training camp? But there was all the talk was he was going to be an amazing outlet, and how much Fields likes to throw to the running backs, blah blah blah, and none of it was happening, and nothing was being adjusted as this thing was spiraling. And quite frankly, if it had not been for, I mean, the Broncos kept the Jets in the game, and
Yes.
Matt Parrott. The effect is very weird. I was looking at I was looking at some of the inactives and actives before the game, and saw that Parrott was going to be starting, and I all I remembered was how bad he was with the Giants, because obviously I covered the Giants as well. And I said, well, maybe that might be a little bit of an advantage. And sure enough, he had three holding penalties in the first half. So between penalties like that, and obviously the fumble that the Jets caused, the turnover, their first, by the way, of the year that the defense has turned over, or has created, you know, that game should have been 20-0 at halftime, but it somehow was close, and it was even close. Most maddeningly, it was close to the point where the Jets had it in their hands. They just needed 5 or 6 or 7 more yards, and Nick Folt's going to kick that game-winning field goal, and they've gone and stolen one, from the Broncos in London. And Aaron Glenn was getting his first win as a Jet head coach, or as an NFL head coach. So it all, in a long-winded answer to you, it just sitting here watching my flat screen, which is just above, I just I was speechless.
Yeah.
And it's funny listening to actually the broadcast, and listening to Kurt Warner talking about it. I mean, it sounded like he just wanted to leave the TV booth after the half.
Yes.
After he was so exasperated. So I think we all felt it. And I don't, I know we'll get into it a little bit, but I was not satisfied with what I heard from Aaron Glenn after the game.
Well, let's start there, Mark, right? So, like, Aaron Glenn, right? This is his first go of it as a head coach. And all the offseason talk from him and his messaging he gave to the fans and to you in the media was, look, we're the New York Jets. We're built for this. I want the fans to be proud of the product that's on field. But this team has regressed, and it's gotten worse week by week. The defense finally had a good game, but up until that point, it was 5 weeks, Mark, of a defense that just couldn't stop a nosebleed, couldn't get a key stop, couldn't create a turnover. So it was nice to see that. But then on the other side, the offense, it's been this narrative of, right, they can't score and they can't create a offensive push unless it's in garbage time, which Glenn likes to neglect and say, no, there's no such thing as that. The defense, opposing defenses are really going to play us tough, and we get good yardage. But when in reality, garbage time is a real thing, and the Jets offense has produced a lot of that in garbage time. They take a massive step back yesterday.
Yeah.
And I thought you hit on a key point there. the game plan for Justin Fields didn't make sense most of the game in terms of he didn't use his legs much, wasn't scrambling, wasn't any designed read option runs, and he didn't use Breece Hall, arguably his second best receiver on the team, at all, not one target, and only target went to Isaiah Davis. And Garrett Wilson was blanketed by Patrick Surtain on 62% of the routes he ran, one target, four targets, one catch. So, as a coach, how can you defend what happened yesterday and what Justin Fields went through, and for you to say it's a ridiculous question that we shouldn't bench him in that point?
Yeah,
How do you
yeah.
feel about that?
Well, I really didn't like the way Aaron handled Brian Costello's question. Our colleague, obviously the Jet beat writer here. That was the one and only question that needed to be answered in that press conference. It was the most relevant question that needed to be posed. And Aaron is very defensive. He's been defensive about the quarterback position since training camp. I spoke to him and asked him a question today. We had a Zoom, at 10 o'clock this morning with Aaron, and I asked him. I said, "Listen, I understand. He keeps making it sound like the benching of Justin Fields yesterday would have been like an all-encompassing benching for good. My question to him was, why would you not think about relieving him for that game like a pitcher is relieved who's struggling, a starting pitcher in baseball who's struggling early and it's clear he's not going to get better. Why would you not consider bringing Tyrod Taylor in, who's quite frankly, is a better passer. He sees the field better. And he continues along that line. His answer was essentially, if I do that, now I've got the starting quarterback looking over his shoulder. Well, you know what? We all look over our shoulder. In every part of business, we're all looking over our shoulder, not just sports. You have to perform to stay in your position. And I don't care whether Justin Fields has to look over his shoulder. After a performance like yesterday, he should have been looking over his shoulder. And, it's funny, it just shows you how TV just kind of glazes over things. As again, I'm watching the broadcast yesterday, which I'm not usually doing because I'm in the press box. And they're flashing Justin Fields' numbers up this year, saying he's having one of his best seasons of his career. Dude, you're 0-6, or at that time you're 0-5. And yeah, he hasn't thrown an interception this year. Yeah, I think he had 7 touchdowns, no interceptions, whatever the numbers were. But again, as you just referred to a minute ago, a lot of that production was in garbage time when the Jets were out of games already. So it's so deceiving. And I don't understand. Aaron needs to look at the picture a little, in my opinion. And I've got a lot of respect for him. I covered his entire career as a Jet. I love the hire of him. I was all for it. It's not looking good right now, quite frankly. He's looked overmatched. He's looked a little bit, over his skis a little bit so far. And that can change. I hope it does change. But I don't. You shouldn't not bench your quarterback just because you don't want to hurt his feelings, and hurt his confidence. I mean, this is a big boy league. Bill Parcells always says, if you bring the Huggies if he needs the Huggies, but we're not in that kind of business here. And yesterday was a classic example of. And listen, I'm bringing Tanner Engstrand in too because, quite frankly,
Yes.
he did nothing to adjust all day. And what was even more bizarre to me was today, Aaron was touting how Engstrand stayed to his game plan.
Which was
In
a
the way.
terrible game plan.
What are we doing here?
The Broncos have one of the best pass rushes in the NFL, one of the best defenses in
Yeah.
the NFL, and you drew up long developing pass plays for a quarterback to sit in the pocket and try and make reads. When that's not Justin Fields, that's not his strength.
Exactly, with a quarterback who could barely get through his first read, at this point. And it's funny. I'll throw the Giants in for a quick second because I've been covering a bit of them, of late since Jackson Dart took over. Jackson's Dart's absolute superpower, from what I've seen so far, is his ability to maneuver in the pocket while keeping his eyes down the field. And he's created. I covered the game on Thursday night against the Eagles. I covered the game on Saturday. I'm sorry, last week on Sunday in New Orleans. And those are the two things that was the thing I took away from both of those games. Even though the New Orleans game went sideways on the Giants, he is unbelievable. His presence in the pocket, and I don't. I mean, listen. I mean, I get it. Denver's got a significant pass rush. These weren't the '85 Bears. Okay. I mean, it's almost like the Jets game planned to play against the 86, the 85 Bears. I mean, yeah, the Broncos are good, but everybody's got a good pass rush, so to what we were talking about before, how do you counteract a pass rush? Quick one read, quick two step drops, run read and out. And I understand that Surtain is a fantastic, cornerback. And yes, he did neutralize, obviously, Garrett Wilson, who looked like he was, obviously, we know that he was ailing a little bit with his knee. There's other ways to counteract that, and I did ask Aaron today, why not? Why would you not have more design runs for Fields? Because that's the one thing we know he does do well. He's an incredible athlete. And in fairness, the Broncos were bringing guys out on the outside, to contain. But I don't think that still precludes you from calling some design runs. That's more to to prevent him getting out of the pocket and scrambling. When
Right.
he's in trouble. So I would have absolutely designed up some called up some more design runs. It
Well,
just the whole thing was it was
it's
so. Was weird, Ryan. When you think about it, it was probably just as maddening for the Denver fan, wondering why in the world are we not blowing these idiots out for
yeah.
God's sake? You
Right.
know, I'm sure in Denver they're looking at it just as negatively as we were here, except for the fact that the Jets are 0-5 and Denver was it was right in the mix.
Well, look, and to go further to your point, Mark, about this offense and what they were doing schematically wise, you know, I go back to what you said there too about Aaron Glenn in the training camp talking about Brees Hall, right? Like screen passes are another big way to stop a pass rush because if you got aggressive pass rush, you can catch them in a screen pass and break one for 20, 30, 40 yards, which the Jets had zero explosive plays yet again yesterday. Do you know that Brees Hall, believe it or not, he has 0 targets on 14 routes lined up as wide receiver. And this is a quote that Aaron Glenn said, you could split him out at wide and let him run the entire route tree because he can run it like a receiver. So to what you're saying about him and Angstrand, how exactly are you utilizing this guy to the best of his potential? So that's where I question as a fan and someone that's been around this game a little bit. It's like I was always told KYP, know your personnel. If you know your personnel, you should be able to coach to their strengths and get them in the best positions. That's not what's happening here with this Jets team. And let's go to situation-wise with Aaron Glenn, right? Someone that you're saying is over his skis a little bit. At the end of the game, let's not even talk about the end of the first half, which is a disaster
Oh my
yet.
God,
But
this is the worst.
the end of the game, though, you burned a timeout in the previous to last drive because you just wanted to punt it on fourth down. So you just burnt a timeout. Those aren't useful for you right there. And then the last drive, you don't run the ball. And then on third down and fourth down, you decide to throw it. A guy that you watched in Justin Fields, who has negative 10 passing yards at that point, has 8 sacks before the final sack. And you said, instead of kicking the field goal and giving our chance for a 62-yarder, which you didn't even know what the distance was at the end of the game, let's not even get there. But you put the ball in Justin Fields' hands, a guy that you watched was already sacked 8 times and wasn't processing the field well, wasn't throwing to open guys. And honestly, Mark, I watched a quarterback who looked like he had the yips and didn't want to throw the football. How
Yeah.
do you not recognize that as a coach in the moment and say, guys, we just got to kick here and take that chance?
Well, the most referring to that sequence to me, and there were so many things that went wrong, beginning with the wasted timeout, which Aaron explained today that he initially felt he wanted to get aggressive, and he was thinking about going for it, but they wanted to call the timeout and talk about it, and John Berger, his analytics guy, talked him out of it, saying, "I don't think this is a good play here." So yeah, so these are the kind of things that should be addressed prior to the good coaching staffs, the Bill Parcells and the Bill Belichick's. Those things are being processed on the sidelines 2 plays before that sequence occurs. Not, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? Geez, the clock's running down. So that was the first mistake. But to me, the most egregious mistake, without question, you referred to it, putting having Justin Fields drop back to pass at 2nd and 3 from the 46-yard line of Denver. Okay, if you gain 6 more yards, you're at the 40. That's a 58-yard field goal, which Nick Folk has kicked in recent weeks, is his career high. And apparently, the conditions were very calm and benign at Tottenham Stadium yesterday. You needed basically, if you make 10 yards, you're almost certain to have Folk make that field goal. And you drop Justin Fields back to pass, as you referred to. He's already been sacked 8 times, hasn't been able to see the field. You're putting your trust in that. and instead of just running Brees Hall, who at worst is going to fall forward for a couple 3 yards and get you a little bit closer to field goal range. And it was only second down at that moment. That put them obviously in third and long and then fourth and long, fourth and eight, third and eight. And I thought the final mistake was, again, I mean, we're obviously crapping all over Fields, but he deserves it at the way he played. You know, you cannot tell me that the Jets had a better chance of converting a fourth and eight on a day when they were 2 out of 15 on third
Oh
down.
my God.
Okay, on a day when Fields was obviously he looked like a high school quarterback who's dumped into a professional game. Are you honestly going to tell me that you think the percentages were higher that you're going to gain that first down than Nick Folk might be used to just might be able to blast a 62-yard field goal, which was not out of the question. If he can get 58, you might be able to kick
Four more
62.
yards, Mark. 4 more yards.
Yeah. So uh, that was obviously the final nail. And I don't think there was any Jet fan or Jet follower on the planet who was watching that sequence who thought the Jets were going to convert on fourth and eight. While there were, I tell you what, the happiest people on that field were everybody on the Broncos
Yeah.
sidelines. Those guys were like, "Oh, great, they're going for it. They're not kicking the field goal." Because they had a better chance kicking the field goal. Now I wasn't out there. I haven't had a chance to talk to Nick Folk. Nick's certainly not going to throw the coaching staff under the bus, but I'm quite certain that Nick, I don't think there's any way that Nick was on that sideline saying there's no way I can kick a 62-yard field goal. I refuse to believe that.
Mark, let's talk about the end of the first half now. I've never
More,
seen anything
more
like
fun,
that before.
more fun and follies.
Right. Like, I've never seen anything like that before in my life where a coach goes for it on 4th and 1 with the fake punt and then just decides to run out the clock. To me, that's coaching scared because you wanted to keep the ball away from Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos. And when you're coaching scared and admitting that you're coaching scared, that to me is a giant red flag that I don't know if you're right for this job because I know you're 0-5. What do you have to lose at this point? Go for it. Be aggressive. Go for points. Don't coach scared because that to me means that you're unsure of yourself and you're unsure of this team and you don't really trust the guys you have out there.
There are so many tentacles of badness to that whole sequence. To be honest with you, I don't even know where to start. You mentioned obviously. Okay, let's put it this way. They're afraid of the Broncos getting the ball. What were the Broncos doing on offense yesterday? The Jets defense was playing fantastic. In a way, you weren't trusting not only your offense, but your defense as well. You know? So okay, let's start there. All right. So yeah, they're afraid to give the Broncos back the ball, right? And which is just to me inexplicable. And listen, I asked Aaron again today about even if you were being uber cautious and you didn't want to put the ball in the air, you had a fourth down and one at around midfield. You could have just why not at the very least try Hail Mary? Why not at the very least? It's the last play of the half. The Broncos aren't going to get the ball back. They had a timeout. They wouldn't be able to use it because you're using that last fourth down play. Not to get a first down, just to literally throw a Hail Mary down. Now, Aaron did admit today, if he had to do it all over again, he probably would have done that. But what was scary was he talked about how there was confusion on the sidelines. He
Oh,
kind of admitted there was confusion on the sidelines. Now, part of it was he was kind of blaming the officiating staff, because they said one of them called a first down and the other one said it was fourth down on the 4th and 1. Now, I didn't see that watching the TV, watching the TV broadcast. Nobody mentioned it. It was clearly, 4th and 1 to me and everybody that was watching. So I don't really know what he heard on the sideline, but at the very least, if you're going to be the most cautious, then just run that thing down, which it was down to about 5 seconds. Put Fields under center or shotgun him and just wing something down the field, and you might get a defensive penalty, which keeps the half going and then puts you in field goal range. I mean, why would you not at least do that? It's a free play. It's a free play, you know. So there were just so many elements of that were so bad. I mean, there was no urgency after. Listen, I love the fact that they went for the fake field goal. In fact, it was such a surprise that
the
the
fake punt.
television
Sorry, you meant, right? The fake punt.
fake
Yeah.
punt. I'm sorry. It was such a surprise that the damn TV cameras
Yeah, they weren't even.
on NFL Network, we never even saw the play because they were off like doing they were and interestingly they were showing the Denver sideline, and the Denver special teams coach was going nuts
Because he
because I
saw
think
Brees Hall lined up in the
he saw Brees
backfield.
exactly. But the TV cam, I mean, that was don't get me going on that NFL Network broadcast, because that was like a high school public
Oh.
broadcast. It was pathetic. Anyway, that's another whole nother podcast. And but anyway, yeah. So I like the aggressive nature there, and the irony to all of this, how basically Aaron shriveled up in that moment, is that his disciple, his latest disciple, Dan Campbell, goes for almost every fourth down, right? And I don't know, they go for that, and then there's no urgency. They run the ball, they get they get one. I mean, Fields gets sacked again, I believe, in that
Yep.
sequence.
Because they ran it and then they said, "Oh, let's throw it now too." It
Yeah,
made no sense.
it was everything was so disjointed, and quite frankly, most of the Jets' offensive game plan it was like conventional, let's run in first down, run in second down, and try to get it to 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 4, and maybe 3rd and 4, and maybe we can get a first down. That became so utterly and pathetically predictable. It obviously didn't work out so well. I mean, it was just like I said, Engstrand. I am some of the things that he did in that game were almost fireable offenses. I mean, obviously you're not going to fire your OC, 6 games in, but he looked so overmatched in that game.
Yep.
And and again, I go back to the last drop back, before the end of the game, because quite frankly, to me, that cost him the game. That you're speechless trying to understand what reasoning. And he'll be available this week on Thursday, and we'll ask him. The Thursday's the day of the coordinators, and I'm sure he'll have time to craft a very sound answer and reasoning for that by Thursday, you would
Right.
think. But I don't think anything he could say is going to change mine or anybody's opinion about how bad of a sequence it was.
Well, look, he's a rookie offensive coordinator, and you have a rookie head coach, and they're all trying to figure this out on the fly. And I will say, Mark, this is the point where I ask you, who's been around this game for a while now, and I mean that in no derogatory way or mean way, but look, when do you start losing the locker room when things like this happen? Because I saw Garrett Wilson's comments after the game on camera, and he was confused even what happened at the end of the first half. And that's a guy, in my opinion, who wants to win, who wants to be so good for this team and help his team win a football game no matter what. But they just keep falling on themselves. And I guess my question is, Aaron Glenn's messaging, when does that start falling short, when guys in that locker room look at you and you're confused and you don't understand what the situation is, and it's leading to really ugly losses like this?
Yeah, you can't fool your players when you're a coach, and I know that locker room wants Aaron to succeed. I mean, Aaron's a guy that you want to play for, and he's said and done all the right things. Not including the poor game management, if you will, on Sunday. But there, you can't tell me that there aren't guys in that locker room. Now, again, I wasn't in there yesterday. I mean, I'm sure, even the comments that Garrett Wilson made yesterday, and I thought he did a very good job of being diplomatic, but also being somewhat transparent about how unhappy he was about the plan and the sequence and the confusion. But even then, he's biting. He's just about drawing blood, biting his tongue. And because these guys don't want to throw the head coach under the bus. They're 6 games into this thing. Again, I mean, this, if the season's over in terms of you want a winning season, but um, you can't tell me that there's not a lot of guys in that locker room that were shaking their heads yesterday, wondering why the hell is Tyrod Taylor not in this game. They're at practice. They see it. They see the way he slings the ball around. He's a better passer. This was a day that, Fields just, I mean, he started the game poorly and got worse as the day went on. And when your players are looking at that, and nothing's being done. I mean, Aaron, as I referred to, Aaron talked about worrying about, Fields looking over his shoulder. He should be worried about his own players, the other players in the locker room, wondering whether he's putting them in the best position to win the game. Because as you referred to at the top, Ryan, the defensive performance yesterday was fantastic. I mean, it's weird because I actually thought Bo Nix was slinging the ball around pretty well early on in that game, and I don't. My eye is not great enough on TV without watching film. What kind of adjustments that Wilkes might have made, and quite frankly, I thought Wilkes has been doing a poor job all year.
Yes.
But I mean, he had those guys ready to play, and obviously they had a players only team meeting the defense before they went over to London, and that obviously seemed to have paid some dividends. But that defensive performance and the special teams performance, which
Yeah.
really gets lost in the mix here, was fantastic. I mean, the return game, the downing of that punt, obviously, ended up giving them, the lead at 11-10.
Right, with the safety. Yeah, 100%.
I mean, there was just so many good things that happened in that game, and Aaron did touch on those things today with us, and he should. I mean, everybody is all they're thinking about is all the nonsense that happened yesterday. And he's the head coach, and he has to address the fact that they've gotten better. I mean, yes, they regressed overall, but mostly because the quarterback has regressed, and the offense, and quite frankly, the play calling, the offensive coordinator. But um, that was a really, really good football game for that defense and the special teams, and it was wasted by the offense. And because of that, you can't tell me that there aren't guys on those sides of the ball that are wondering, and even on the offensive side of the ball, for all the guys that want to support Justin Fields, and nobody wants to support him more than Garrett Wilson, who's his college teammate. There has to be there's guys in that locker room. It's just human nature that are wondering why are we not bringing Tyrod Taylor in just for the second half? Do something. I started tweeting yesterday after this third three and out. I just said I think the Jets are one or two more three and outs away where they've got to bring Tyrod Taylor in. And obviously it never happened, and we never really got a. I was not happy with the explanation that Aaron gave. That Aaron is so petrified of a quarterback controversy. You get bigger problems that right
Way
now.
bigger.
Throwing
Way
six.
bigger.
You know what I mean?
Way bigger,
So
Mark. And that's where, again, I go back to, I know it's different sport, but Joel Sherman, I do pinstripe posts, and he always talks about feel of the game, Ryan. Feel of the game.
yeah,
Is the manager feeling what the situation is going on the field? Because that's a key thing, right? It Aaron Glenn did not have a feel of what was going on with Justin Fields and the offense, and that was a poor reflection and ultimately ended in that result because, like you said, the defense and special teams really gave them a chance to win that football game yesterday, and the offense was just a complete letdown, and they missed their huge opportunity to put Tyrod in even just for a couple series to see if they could spark something offensively and win a football game for once this year.
yeah.
My final question, Mark, for you, though. Look, 0-6, the heat is only going to get hotter around this noise with Aaron Glenn and the job he's doing in his first year. I want to be patient, but the more and more evidence is piling up here, Mark, where I'm seeing a coach who just clearly is in over his head. And I have to question, is he really the fit to be a head coach for this job? Because let's say the Jets do go 2 wins, 3 wins this year, or God forbid, 0 wins. How can you honestly say, as an owner, Woody Johnson, I can keep this guy as my head coach next year when you're going to end up with a top pick and you're going to be selecting a quarterback this upcoming draft?
What I would say is, first of all, I want to see progress, with Aaron and the Jets because I want Aaron to succeed because I like him a lot, and I do believe he's got some good traits to be a good head coach. But if Woody Johnson watches another 10 of these of what he watched yesterday, you can't bring him back. I mean, he absolutely has to see progress. And I think he will see progress. Listen, this is a learning experience for everybody there, Aaron and obviously Angstrand and, in terms of, and Muji, quite frankly, at the top. Um, I don't want to say I'll be surprised, but I don't think you're going to see a game that poorly coached again this year. I hope, in my opinion, at least on the offensive side of the ball, let's say. But as you said, the Joel's comment about the feel. All of these sports games they're chess matches. And baseball is a classic example of it, which obviously Joel knows as well as anybody. Who's covered the sport as much as he has. Football is less so than baseball, but there are chess moves to be made in football. There's adjustments to be made. Bill Belichick was notorious for being one of the best, halftime adjustment coaches around. But I hated to see the Jets just continually just bang their head against the same brick wall that they were doing all day yesterday. And the use of the timeouts, the clock management. Aaron even, earlier in the year, I was not there that day, but I know Aaron said one day, in training camp that he was talking about how the last 4 minutes of each half is on the head coach.
Yeah.
So he said it himself, and so in answer to the larger question, Woody Johnson needs to see improvement. He needs to see, and that's good. That goes for everybody. Now, listen, the Jets have got a Carolina team that just took care of Dallas yesterday. Normally when you see Carolina on the schedule next week, you're like, all right, well, that's a good chance for them to get their first win. Well, Carolina's 3-3. They're not so bad. They just took care of a Dallas team that smoked the Jets.
They're looking at the Jets as that's an easy win right now.
Exactly, and then you get the Browns, coming after that, and which will probably be the Tank Bowl, right?
Watch Shador Sanders come in and light it up on us too, because like
Uh,
that's the guy they could have. Listen, I know they weren't going to, but that was a
yeah,
guy that passed up in the draft, and I'm just saying, like, it'll probably happen. Like, I wouldn't
yeah,
shock
that,
me.
that would that would fall into the category, and it's a very large closet full of items in the only the Jets
Holy the
category. But yeah, I listen. It's too early to make an indictment of Aaron. It hasn't looked good so far. Today, I thought Sunday was a real low point offensively. And listen, he's in charge of that. And he if he hears that pass call coming over his headset, at 2nd and 3 from the 46, he's vetoing that. Okay, he's got to veto it. Okay, it was your OC that made the call, but you got to veto that. You got to say no, no, we're running the ball. We're not dropping this guy back to pass. So these are the things that Aaron's learning on the fly, and we're hearing from his explanations that you know he's not quite up to speed with some of these things as a head coach. The one thing, and this is something I think I'm writing about for in a day or two, if I could just bring this up,
Yeah,
Ryan. Aaron keeps referring to, and again, it's his experience, and I get it, but he referring to the 0-11 start with Detroit,
yeah,
on Dan Campbell, and how they were in bad shape down in New Orleans with the Saints. And it's almost like he's throwing that out there, like, well, listen, it's going to happen to us that way. We'll turn it around just like they are. Well, there's no guarantees that that's going to happen, right? We don't have Jared Goff, for example, waiting in the wings. Now, I get it. They lost with Jared Goff too, but, eventually they got it right. And Jared Goff was, borderline MVP candidate. Or he was MVP candidate for that team. So I caution the Jets fans who think that just because Aaron's going through this with the Jets the same way he went through it in
with
Detroit,
Detroit.
the same turnaround is going to happen, and the Jets are going to be one of the best teams in the league in 2 years. They got to make that happen themselves, and that comes by making progress and small steps like they did with the defense playing better. Hopefully the defense has found itself a little bit yesterday because that's where some of the best talent on the team lies.
Absolutely,
I mean, they were given 30 plus points away. It was an absolute travesty before
travesty.
yesterday. So, yeah, you just got to hope, that baby steps, and I know this sounds kind of corny and cliche, but that the offense needs to make that step now. And quite frankly, in Carolina in that first half, if we're seeing the same ineptitude out of Justin Fields, I don't give a damn what Aaron Glenn is worried about with Justin Fields' feelings or hurting his feelings or looking over his shoulder. He's taking the Sparky Anderson hook and taking his ass off the field, and he's putting Tyrod Taylor on the field because the Jets need hope to win a game at some point. They've lost 3 games now by 2 points and another one by 6 points. So, again, there's been some garbage time involved a little bit there, but they've had opportunities. They've had leads in fourth quarters like they did yesterday. So, a lot of that's on the head coach. So you got to figure out how to get over that hump.
Well, Mark, this was awesome. This was a nice therapy session for me. And I'm sure a lot of Jets fans are going to appreciate listening to this as well. We'll see how it goes from here, man. Like you said, the Panthers coming up this week. It doesn't sound great for Garrett Wilson with the knee. So we'll see what comes out of that. But I am anxious to see how the rest of this season goes and if the Jets can take, like you said, those incremental steps forward and not keep going backwards. Mark
Yeah.
Cannizzaro, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Ryan. Talk to you soon.